All right, so we're here in Susan's podcast, and what we're going to look at is how to set it up in a way that it goes to the very minimum we're going to do today is Google Podcast and Apple Podcast. They're the main platforms. There's also Spotify, which Anchor is owned by Spotify. So Susan already has her first episode published. That means it's available on Spotify already, right? So which is great. But even if you go into settings and then you go into podcast availability, we click on that. I'm going to be clicking on this.
Oh, no.
Take over here. Yeah, no, it's okay. So in this page, so this was under settings, podcast availability, right? This page has a few interesting links. One of the links here is under Anchor, and this is your, what they call a public page on Anchor FM with all the episodes. You know, this is something that if you don't have a page on your website, this is what you can promote as the link to the podcast. So this one. And on that page, you can also have little icons, you know, to go to your website and to go to other platforms. For example, if I prefer listening to podcast on Spotify, there will be a little Anchor. Actually, I can show you. It's under dashboard. If I just open it, I want to show you so you know your way around Anchor. It's very handy to know these little things. So in the dashboard, if we click on this view public site, that's how your public site looks. And we have your Instagram, we have your Facebook. We didn't set up the website, but you can set up a website. It will be shown here. But also here, there will be a row of available other platforms to listen to this podcast, you know. So Spotify, we already have here by default. And that's what we are doing today. So this is it, right? The most important link that we need in order for us to set up our podcast on another platform is this RSS feed. It's don't ask me what RSS stands for. I just realized I have a blank mind and I forgot. But anyway, it's basically a special feed that these platforms check maybe every hour, depends on their own settings. And every time you either update or upload a new episode and publish it, it will be through this link, that platform, you don't have to do anything. It will recognize and we will pull all the information, the graphic, the description, and obviously the audio, and publish it on their own platform, which is really, really handy. So we're going to, and if you ever using some other apps, sometimes, you know, like recently, for example, I discovered this app called Headliner. And if you use this link, it can automatically check if you have any new episodes and maybe create little small videos for it. Sounds more exciting than what it is. It's a bit glitchy. So, but that's where you get your RSS feed, right? So you get it there. And so now the most important ones to have is Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. They're the biggest ones. Of course, you have some other options, and this is in your own time. You can go and set yourself up. You will need this RSS feed link that we just copied. So that's really, really important that you can understand in order for you to set up. But today we're going to set up Apple Podcast and Google Podcasts. When you click on this, you know, to open up this tab, you can see to submit to Apple Podcast, use Apple Podcast Connect. Now, a word of disclaimer, if you have an Apple ID, I would actually try and, first of all, make sure that you do remember your password, because Apple ID is such a wonky thing. And if you don't remember the password, it just like makes you jump through the hoops. If you have an Apple ID, but you never set up a payment method on your Apple ID, it's not going to allow you to use Apple Podcasts. It's absolutely free. Nothing will be charged, but it's just like a little kind of bureaucracy thing that you have to have your account on Apple set up properly to use this feature. That's just so you have it in mind, right? Because that's where you can encounter, you know, complications, let's say, a little bit in your process. But other than that, you just have to click and maybe open it in a new tab. We already have it opened here. And what Susan already did is she already logged in with her Apple ID. And she obviously has it set up because then that's what she saw after she logged in. That's her name that she's logged in here. And there's a button Get Started. So we're going to click on that button. And now we're setting up this podcast account here. Let me just see what it wants. Display name. For the podcast, for your account. Well, let's just use Susan Stewart. We can change that. Do you mind typing it in, Susan? Because I don't think, yeah. I think that's your personal details that you have to.
Yeah,
perfect. And then we'll just tick individual here. We tick I have read and can agree to these terms and to these terms and conditions, and we save. Okay, so now that link that we copied, the RSS feed link, that's where we're going to need it. Add show with an RSS feed, yes. And now here we just paste this feed, add it. And that's it. Now, this is now a draft because they're processing. It could take a few minutes, could take a little longer. You know, there's a few factors. I'm not even sure exactly. Now, what's important here is that you fill in these things. So, for example, if you don't have any ads, you know, sometimes they add little kind of pre-recorded ads into podcasts. I don't do it in my own. So I know Susan doesn't do it. So this show doesn't contain third-party content. That's what it means. Show contacts, you don't have to fill this up, but you kind of have to make sure that this email address matches the email address on the podcast. It's very important for RSS feeds that whatever email address you used to set up Anchor FM account, that is your email address for your podcast. You can't change it unless you're changing your logins, which you can. I mean, you can change it in theory, but you can't have use a different one here. So that's the one you're using. You don't have to put to fill in your name, you know, if you don't want people to contact you from there. I don't really like people contacting me from, especially on my phone. And now you can see the save button became clickable. So it was grayed out before while they were saying that they're processing. So it only took a few minutes, right? And now we're going to save this. Let's see what's going to happen. Availability. Oh, no, it became purple because we ticked the box there. Okay. Make this show available. So this is now availability tab. Make this show available in all countries. Yes, we want that. Make the show available for distribution. We definitely want that because then it goes into the Apple Podcast catalog. And release the show as soon as published. That's the setting. You know, there's no point changing these settings here. Unless, of course, you want to do a big song and dance that you're now on Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts on this date. I wouldn't bother really, but you know, if you want, then you can change it. And we don't have ratings and reviews now yet. Now, let me just see. It's still processing. And then there's episodes. This one, you don't need to do anything. So basically, we're just going to go away now and let it, you know, process everything. And then this button here will turn into publish. And that's where we will be able to publish this onto Apple Podcasts. So we'll leave this tab open. And meanwhile, let me just go back. Meanwhile, we're going to go and set up Google Podcasts. And Google Podcasts, you need to use Google Podcast Manager. When you click on this button, this page will open, and just make sure that you are signed in here in the Google account. This is actually a wrong one, right, Susan? We had to resend. So it's the same email address that Susan is using for her podcast. So now we click Start Now. We paste again the RSS feed. Next step. And this is much faster, right? Google, much faster. Apple just wants us to jump through the hoops all the time. So we have the first episode. There's only one so far been published as we record this. So this is perfect. You know, it took the title, took the description. Here's what the good news is. You never need to come back here to the Google Podcast Manager to change anything in the title or description if you decided to change the wording or anything. All you have to do is go back into your Anchor FM, just go into episodes or go into settings and then change things there. And the RSS feed, as I said, it checks ever so often. So it will actually check and update whatever you decided to. Let's say you wanted to add website address into the description or, you know, just change it all together. So you never need to do this again. So we previewed, everything looks good. Next step. Verification code set. So I'm going to pause this recording while Susan goes into her email. And I just have to say, I clicked send code here because I didn't say it and I stopped recording. So now we're going to wait until Susan gets that code. So we have the Google code.
691738.
738. Okay. Perfect. And that's it. That's how you verify the ownership. And we just click on get started. So easy. Really, really easy.
Amazing.
Now, the only thing now is that we need to get a link for this podcast. Let me just see where it is. Share podcast. So we'll click on share podcast. And there's a link, right? So now I'm going to copy this link. I'm going to go back into Anchor FM podcast availability page, scroll down, and here is where I paste that link. It's kind of very long for Google Podcast, and add it to the profile. So if we go into the public page now, and if we reload this page, oh, where did it go? Just had it. There, look. Oh, why is it disappearing? I don't know if you saw that there was 3 icons here showing. Yeah, they will be there. They will get there. They will get there now. Let me just do one more time, just see why. Okay, I'm not sure why it disappears. I've never seen anything like that. But the idea is that the more we add these, the podcasts, the more the icons will just appear here. You know, so let's have a look at the Apple now, what's happening there. Yay, look, now we have the button publish. Now it took the graphic, name, everything is fine. Now frequencies, here's you can choose how often it should check for new episodes. I would just say daily. If you decided to, you know, I don't know how often are you planning, but you know, what if you just on a whim decided to release 2 episodes a week, you know, so why not? And you can always, if on this Apple Podcast Connect page, you can always see when the last update was. But I will be honest with you, I never once went back into that since I set up my podcast. It's just, there is no need, you know, we have time to do, like, we don't have time for these things. We have time to do important things. And now, why the publish buttons stopped? I don't know why. Refresh. The publish button, or did I publish it? Maybe I clicked on publish already. That's what happened. See, no, there, publish. We found one or more issue. Okay. Okay, frequency, fine. So yeah, and what else? Save. Okay, I see what it was. First we needed to save. Now we publish. Published.
Published.
That's it. You're now on Apple Podcasts. So now we have to find the link for this episode on the Apple Podcasts. Let me just see. Show website. There it is. So here it is on the very bottom, and there's a handy button copy. So it's on the bottom of the page here, guys, right? We copied that, go back into the podcast availability, and just paste it into the Apple Podcasts. Okay, we have that. So this 2, and let's just see, maybe it'll start working now.
There you go.
But
that's funny.
I think it's maybe just right now there's some sort of glitch on Anchor itself, or maybe a browser or whatever, you know, but it actually will definitely show. Now, what you can do as well, if you want, you can go through all of these. You use the portals for these places, you know, you go through the steps. They're kind of like telling you what to do. All you need is that RSS feed link that you can always get from the top page here, right? And then you can go and you can set yourself up. Now, I think I did a couple, but I don't know, you know, I don't myself never listen to any of these. So what I do is I take time to set myself up on these platforms. You know, it's quite simple. So if I click on this Google poll, you know, straight away, I think here you just need to sign in, you create your for podcasters. There you go. Right, for podcasters. You don't need it featured, you just want to submit it. And then it says, submit your podcast with a Pocket Cast share link. There you go. And there, enter your, we're going to do it straight away because why not? We're here. Let's set you up. Where was it there? So there we go. It's a public podcast, submit. So it's a little bit of looking around sometimes. Actually, I want to take this link, pocketcast.com. So we /submit. So we know the link. Success. That's it. It can take up to 12 hours for your podcast to be indexed. No problem. We will, oh yeah, there it is. And share the podcast. Look, they even gave us a link straight away. So we're going to go back with this link. I just copied it and I'm going to post it here.
Brilliant.
And now whenever Anchor will get their act together, that's what you're going to see, the disappearing act that they have right now. And that's what you do. And that's how you set up all these platforms one by one. They don't have to be done all at the same time. You know, if you just went into a platform, got confused, you know, didn't know where to go, just leave it, come back another day and with fresh head. As long as you have the Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts sorted, that's the main platforms that will give you visibility. If you ask me, well, why do I need to bother putting my podcast to other platforms? It's not even about people listening to you there. I myself don't listen to podcasts as a thing, right? I don't. But it's all about Google searches, because the more your name is in Google on your podcast, right? The more when somebody types in your name in Google, all these pages that these platforms create for you, they show up in Google. So your discoverability becomes bigger, and then they come in straight into real valuable content, right? Win-win, win-win. And that's us today.